Blood on the floor tiles is slippery, far more slippery than movies ever tell you. For 24-year-old Sophia Bennett, the smell of copper and antiseptic was just another Tuesday night in the ER until the double doors crashed open. A man was wheeled in, half dead, riddled with gunshot wounds that no street thug could have inflicted. He was a Navy SEAL, a ghost in the system, and he was carrying secrets that powerful men would kill to keep buried. Sophia thought saving his life was the hard part. She was wrong, because 10 minutes after she dropped 3 extracted bullets into a metal tray, a suit-clad agent blocked her path and asked her the one question that would turn her life into a target. The rain over Norfolk, Virginia was relentless that night. It battered the roof of St. Jude's Medical Center like handfuls of gravel, a chaotic rhythm that matched the frantic energy inside the emergency room. Sophia Bennett adjusted her ponytail, the elastic band tight enough to give her a headache, and checked the time on the wall clock, 2:14 a.m. She was 6 months out of nursing school, still sporting that new scrub smell, or so the veteran nurses liked to joke. She hadn't yet developed the 1,000-yard stare that the senior staff, like Dr. Holloway, wore like a badge of honor. To Sophia, every siren was still a spike of adrenaline, every patient a puzzle to be solved. "Quiet night," muttered Greg, the intake nurse, scrolling through his phone at the front desk. "Don't say the Q word," Sophia warned, leaning against the counter and sipping lukewarm coffee. "You know that summons the demons." As if on cue, the radio on the desk crackled to life. The dispatcher's voice was distorted, breathless. "Inbound trauma. ETA 2 minutes. Male approximate age 35. Multiple GSWs. BP is dropping fast. 80 over 50. He's unresponsive." "GSWs," Greg sighed, sliding his phone into his pocket. "Gang violence again?" "Dispatcher didn't say," Sophia said, already moving. Her training kicked in, overriding the fatigue. "Trauma 4 is open. I'll prep the fluids." The next 2 minutes were a blur of preparation. Sophia spiked bags of saline and O-negative blood, laid out the trauma shears, and pulled on fresh gloves. The automatic doors hissed open, admitting a gust of wind and rain, followed by 2 paramedics pushing a gurney at a dead sprint. "What have we got?" Dr. Holloway barked, striding into the room. He was a short, wiry man who drank too much espresso and had hands steady as a rock. "John Doe," the lead paramedic shouted over the noise of the gurney's wheels. "Found him dumped near the docks. No ID, no wallet. Just 3 holes in his chest and abdomen." Sophia grabbed the side of the gurney to help steer it into the bay. As they transferred the man onto the hospital bed, her hand brushed his arm. It was rock hard, muscle dense as iron. This wasn't a junkie or a malnourished street kid. Even under the grime and blood, the man was built like a tank. "On 3, Holloway commanded. 1, 2, 3. They hefted him over. The man groaned, a low, guttural sound that vibrated in his chest. "Let's get these clothes off," Sophia said, grabbing the trauma shears. She began cutting through the thick, tactical fabric of his jacket. It wasn't denim or leather. It was ripstop, high-grade gear. Underneath, he wore a black tactical shirt that was soaked through with crimson. As she cut away the shirt, revealing the damage, the room went momentarily silent. There were 3 entrance wounds, 2 in the upper chest, 1 in the lower left abdomen. But they weren't the ragged, messy tears of a drive-by shooting. They were precise, tightly grouped. "Look at the spacing," Holloway muttered, snapping on his own gloves. "That's a double tap to the chest, 1 to the gut. Someone wanted this guy dead professionally." Sophia worked quickly, applying pressure pads to the wounds. "Doctor, look at his left shoulder." There, obscured by mud and blood, was a tattoo. It was a trident, grasped by an eagle, anchoring a pistol. "A SEAL," Greg whispered from the doorway. "That's a Navy SEAL trident." Dr. Holloway's expression darkened. "We treat him like anyone else. Sophia, get a line in. Greg, call the blood bank. We're going to need massive transfusion protocols. I don't care who he is. Right now, he's bleeding out." Sophia hunted for a vein in the crook of the man's elbow. His skin was pale, clammy with shock. As she slid the needle in and secured the tape, she noticed something else. His hands. They were calloused, scarred, the knuckles battered. But on the inside of his wrist there was a series of numbers written in black permanent marker. 449XC. It looked freshly written. "BP is 70/40, Sophia called out, watching the monitor. "He's crashing." "We need to get those bullets out and stop the internal bleeding," Holloway said, grabbing a scalpel. "No time for the OR upstairs. We're doing a thoracotomy right here. Sophia, suction!" The next hour was a masterclass in controlled chaos. The room smelled of cauterized flesh and iron. Sophia moved instinctively, handing instruments, suctioning blood, and monitoring the vitals. They were fighting a war against gravity and blood loss within the confines of a 100-square-foot room. Holloway worked with grim determination. "Got one," he grunted, using forceps to pull a deformed slug from the man's pectoral muscle. He dropped it into the metal kidney dish Sophia held out. "Clink. And 2, Holloway said moments later. Clink. The third one was deeper, lodged near the spleen. It took longer. The monitor wailed a warning rhythm as the patient's heart rate spiked, then faltered. "Come on, soldier," Sophia whispered, her eyes glued to the man's face. He had a strong jaw, dark stubble, and a scar running through his left eyebrow. "Stay with us." "Got it," Holloway exhaled, pulling the third bullet free. It hit the metal tray with a heavy clang. Sophia glanced down at the tray. The 3 bullets sat in a pool of blood. She wasn't a ballistics expert, but she had seen enough gunshot victims in Norfolk. These didn't look like standard 9mm rounds. They were longer, heavier, and they had a strange silver tip. "Stabilize him," Holloway ordered, stepping back and stripping off his bloody gown. "Sophia, clean him up. I need to go document this. If he's military, we have to notify the base." "Yes, doctor." The room cleared out, leaving Sophia alone with the unconscious seal and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor. The storm outside seemed to have quieted, or maybe the adrenaline in her ears was just fading. She began the process of cleaning the blood from his skin, wiping down his chest and arms with warm, soapy water. As she washed the ink off his wrist, the numbers 449XC didn't wash away. They were written in industrial marker. Suddenly the man's hand shot out. Sophia gasped, jumping back. His fingers clamped around her wrist with a crushing grip. His eyes flew open. They were an intense, icy blue, bloodshot and wild with panic. "Easy," Sophia said, her voice trembling but professional. "You're in the hospital. You're safe. I'm a nurse." The man tried to sit up, but the pain slammed him back down. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. He pulled Sophia closer, his grip not loosening. The drive," he rasped. His voice was like gravel. "Sir, you've been shot," Sophia said, trying to pry his fingers loose gently. "You need to rest." "Listen to me," he hissed, his eyes locking onto hers with terrifying intensity. "Don't. Let them. Take it." "Take what?" He fumbled at his waist, near the waistband of his blood-soaked tactical pants. Sophia looked down. There, hidden in a small, sewn-in pocket inside the waistband that she had missed during the initial trauma cut, was a small, black object. It looked like a USB drive, but smaller, thicker. "Hide it," he wheezed. His eyes rolled back for a second, then focused again. "They are coming." "Who is coming?" "The police." "No," he groaned. "Not police. The Chimera." Before Sophia could ask what a chimera was, the man's hand went limp. He fell back against the pillows, unconscious again. The monitor remained steady. He was out, but stable. Sophia stood there, her heart hammering against her ribs. In her hand, she held the small black drive. It was warm from his body heat. Hide it. It went against every protocol she knew. This was patient property. It should be bagged and tagged with his clothes. But the fear in his eyes had been primal. It was the look of a man who knew death was walking through the door. She looked at the tray of bullets, then at the drive. On impulse, a split-second decision she would question for the rest of her life, Sophia slipped the drive into her scrub pocket. Just as she did, the double doors to the ER trauma bay swung open again. It wasn't the police. Two men in dark, perfectly tailored suits walked in. They didn't look like they had just come in from a storm. They were impeccably dry. They moved with a silent, predatory grace. The man in front was tall, with graying hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He didn't look at the patient. He looked straight at Sophia. "Nurse," he said. His voice was smooth, cultured, and utterly cold. "Step away from the patient." Sophia froze. The instinct to protect her patient flared up, overriding her fear. She moved slightly, placing herself between the unconscious SEAL and the strangers. "This is a restricted area," Sophia said, channeling her best head nurse voice, though she was far from it. "You can't be in here. Who are you?" The lead man stopped 3 feet from her. Up close, his eyes were a dull, lifeless brown. He reached into his jacket pocket. For a terrifying second, Sophia thought he was reaching for a gun. Instead, he produced a leather wallet and flipped it open. A gold badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights. Federal Bureau of Investigation. "Agent Miller," the man said. He gestured to his partner, a younger, stockier man with a buzz cut. "This is Agent Wolf. We are taking jurisdiction of this patient." "Jurisdiction?" Sophia frowned. "He's in critical condition. He just came out of a thoracotomy. He can't be moved." "We aren't moving him yet," Miller said, snapping the badge shut, "but we are securing the room. No one comes in or out without our authorization. That includes your doctors." "I have to check his vitals," Sophia insisted, "and Dr. Halloway needs to—" "Dr. Halloway has been informed," Miller cut her off. "This man is a fugitive, nurse." He glanced at her ID badge. "Nurse Bennett. He is a threat to national security." Sophia looked back at the man in the bed. Commander Jack Reynolds, if that was his name, looked about as threatening as a broken doll right now. "He's unconscious," Sophia said. "He's not a threat to anyone." Miller stepped closer, invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne and stale tobacco. "You have no idea what that man is capable of. Now step aside." Sophia hesitated, then stepped back. She could feel the weight of the USB drive in her pocket. It felt like it was burning a hole through the fabric. "Hide it," the SEAL had said. "They are coming." Were these the they he warned her about? The FBI? If he was a fugitive, wouldn't the FBI be the good guys? But the SEAL's fear had felt genuine, and there was something off about Miller. He wasn't looking at the patient with concern, or even professional curiosity. He was looking at the room, scanning it. His eyes landed on the metal kidney dish. The 3 bullets. "Are these the rounds you extracted?" Miller asked, walking over to the tray. "Yes," Sophia said. Miller stared at the bullets for a long moment. He didn't touch them. He just stared. Then he looked at Wolf. "Bag them. Evidence." Wolf produced a plastic evidence bag and a pair of latex gloves from his pocket. He moved efficiently, scooping the bloody bullets into the bag. "Wait," Sophia said. "Pathology needs to log those. It's hospital protocol." Miller turned to her, a thin, patronizing smile playing on his lips. "Federal jurisdiction supersedes hospital protocol, Nurse Bennett. This is a matter of national security. These rounds are classified." "Classified bullets?" Sophia's mind raced. What kind of bullets were classified? "I need to finish charting," Sophia said, her voice shaking slightly. "I need to log the procedure." "Go ahead," Miller said, "but do not leave the floor. We might have questions." Sophia walked out of the trauma bay, her legs feeling like jelly. She went to the nurse's station. Greg was gone, likely dealing with another patient. The hallway was quieter now. She sat down at the computer, but she didn't type. She watched Trauma Bay 4 from the reflection in the glass monitor. Inside, she saw Agent Wolf checking under the hospital bed. Then he checked the pile of clothes, the tactical gear Sophia had cut off. He went through every pocket. He patted down the jacket. He checked the boots. He turned to Miller and shook his head. Miller said something, his face tightening in anger. He pointed at the patient. Wolf went to the bed and began patting down the unconscious Seal. He checked under the pillows. He checked the mattress. They weren't securing the patient. They were searching for something. The drive. Sophia's hand went to her pocket. She gripped the small plastic device. Panic began to rise in her throat, cold and sharp. If they found it on her, she needed to stash it. She couldn't keep it on her person. If they searched her, she was done. She looked around. The break room was down the hall. The lockers? No, too obvious. The bathroom? No, they might look there. Her eyes landed on the sharps container, mounted on the wall near the med cart. No, too dangerous to retrieve. Then she saw it. The potted plant in the corner of the waiting area, a fake ficus that had been there since 1990. The soil was covered in dusty decorative moss. Sophia stood up, grabbing a clipboard to look busy. She walked towards the waiting area, trying to keep her pace casual. She passed the open door of the trauma bay. Miller was watching her. She could feel his eyes on her back. "Nurse Bennett?" Miller called out. Sophia froze. She turned slowly. "Yes, Agent?" Miller was standing in the doorway. He had taken off his jacket, revealing a shoulder holster. "A moment, please." He beckoned her back. Sophia swallowed hard. She walked back toward him, her heart thumping so loud she was sure he could hear it. "Yes?" "When you prepped the patient," Miller said, his voice dropping to a conversational volume that was somehow more terrifying than a shout. "Did he say anything to you?" "He was unconscious," Sophia lied. It came out easier than she expected. "Before he went under, or perhaps when he first arrived. Did he regain consciousness at all?" Sophia thought of the blue eyes, the desperate grip on her wrist. "Hide it." "No," Sophia said. "He's been out cold since he arrived. GCS of 3. Miller stared at her. He had the eyes of a shark, dead, unblinking. He was studying her face, looking for a micro-expression, a tick, a sign of deception. "That's strange," Miller said softly, because the paramedics said he was semi-conscious in the ambulance. Mumbling. "He must have crashed before he got through the doors," Sophia said, keeping her face neutral. "We had to intubate almost immediately." Miller held her gaze for another 5 seconds. It felt like 5 years. Finally, he nodded. "Very well. If he wakes up, you call me immediately. Do not speak to him. Do not let anyone else speak to him. Is that clear?" "Crystal," Sophia said. "Good." Miller turned back to the room. Sophia turned and walked away. She needed to get to the bathroom. She needed to vomit. She rounded the corner, out of sight of Trauma Bay 4. She ducked into the staff restroom and locked the door. She leaned against the sink, breathing heavily. She splashed cold water on her face. She looked at herself in the mirror. "What have you gotten yourself into, Sophia?" She reached into her pocket and pulled out the drive. It was a matte black USB, but there was a symbol etched onto the casing. A tiny silver chimera, a lion with a goat's head and a snake for a tail. She couldn't keep this. She had to give it to someone. But who? Holloway? The police? If Miller was FBI, he was the police. Suddenly, a heavy pounding on the restroom door made her jump. "Nurse Bennett!" It was Miller's voice. "Open up!" Sophia's heart stopped. Had he seen her? Did he know? "Just a second," she called out, her voice cracking. She looked around frantically. There was nowhere to hide it. The toilet? No, it might float or clog. The trash? First place they'd look. She looked up. The drop ceiling. One of the tiles was slightly askew. She scrambled up onto the toilet seat. She was tall enough to reach. She pushed the tile up. It was dark and dusty up there. She shoved the drive as far back as she could reach, onto the metal tracking, and slid the tile back into place. She jumped down, flushed the toilet for sound effect, and smoothed her scrubs. She unlocked the door. Miller was standing there, filling the frame. He looked past her, into the small bathroom. "You took a while," he said. "Nature calls," Sophia said, trying to be glib. Miller didn't smile. He stepped into the bathroom, forcing Sophia to back out into the hall. He looked in the trash can. He lifted the lid of the toilet tank. He turned back to her. "We need to ask you one more question, Sophia." He used her first name. It wasn't friendly. "What is it?" Sophia asked. Miller stepped out of the bathroom, closing the distance between them until she was backed against the wall. "The patient," Miller said. "He had a pocket inside his waistband. It was empty, but the stitching was stretched." He leaned in, his face inches from hers. "Did you find anything on him that wasn't a weapon?" Sophia's mouth went dry. This was it. The one question. She started. "Think carefully," Miller whispered. "Perjury is a felony. Treason is a death sentence." "Did he give you the drive?" The air in the hallway seemed to vibrate with tension. Sophia felt the cold ceramic tiles of the wall pressing into her back. Agent Miller was close enough that she could count the pores on his nose, his breath smelling of stale coffee and something metallic, like old coins. "I asked you a question, Sophia," Miller repeated, his voice dropping an octave. "Did he give you the drive?" Sophia's mind raced. If she said yes, she handed over the only leverage the dying man had, and possibly signed her own death warrant. If she said no, and they found it, she was done. But looking into Miller's dead, brown eyes, she realized something terrifying. It didn't matter if she gave it to him. If he got what he wanted, he would have no reason to leave any loose ends. "I told you," Sophia said, forcing her voice to remain steady, though her knees were knocking together. "I cut his clothes off. I scrubbed him down. I found a pack of gum and a lighter. That's it. If there was a drive, maybe it fell out in the ambulance. Or maybe he dropped it in the mud where you found him." Miller stared at her. The silence stretched for 10 agonizing seconds. He raised his hand, reaching toward her face. Sophia flinched, bracing for a strike. "Agent Miller!" The boom of a voice echoed down the corridor. Miller froze, his hand inches from Sophia's cheek. He turned his head slowly. Dr. Holloway was storming down the hall, his lab coat flying behind him like a cape. He looked furious. Behind him stood 2 hospital security guards, Paul and Dave. They were retired cops, paunchy and tired, but they had their hands on their belts. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Holloway demanded, stopping 3 feet from Miller. "That is my nurse. You do not corner my staff. You do not touch my staff." Miller straightened up, smoothing his suit jacket. The mask of civility slid back into place, though his eyes remained cold. "Dr. Holloway, we were just having a debrief regarding the patient's personal effects, a matter of national security." "I don't care if it's a matter of the second coming," Holloway spat, stepping between Miller and Sophia. "This is a hospital. We save lives here. We don't interrogate staff in the hallway at 3 a.m. "Sophia, are you all right?" Sophia nodded, exhaling a breath she didn't know she was holding. "I'm fine, doctor." "Go back to the nurse's station," Holloway ordered, not taking his eyes off Miller. "Check the crash cart." "But go," Holloway said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Sophia squeezed past Miller, careful not to brush against him. As she walked away, she heard Holloway's voice drop to a lethal whisper. "Let me be clear, Agent. I've called the hospital administrator, and I've called the Norfolk PD liaison. If you disrupt my ER again, I will have you escorted out, federal badge or not." Miller chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "You have no idea what's happening here, Doctor. But for your sake, I'll respect your territory. For now." Sophia reached the nurse's station and collapsed into the chair. Her hands were shaking so badly she couldn't type. She looked at the reflection in the monitor. Miller and Wolfe were retreating back toward the waiting room, establishing a perimeter. They weren't leaving. They were just regrouping. She looked at the ceiling tiles above the bathroom down the hall. The drive. It was still there. Beep, beep, beep. The monitor in Trauma Bay 4 quickened. Sophia jumped up. The seal. She hurried into the room. The curtain was drawn, shielding the bed from the hallway. Jack Reynolds was awake. He wasn't moving much. The anesthesia and blood loss had seen to that. But his eyes were open. They were scanning the room, darting from the door to the window to the vent in the ceiling. When Sophia entered, his gaze locked onto her like a laser designator. "You," he rasped. His voice was barely a whisper. Sophia moved to his side, checking the IV drip. "You need to stay still. You've lost a lot of blood. I'm Sophia. I'm your nurse." "The suits," Reynolds whispered, ignoring her advice. "Are they outside?" "2 of them," Sophia whispered back, leaning in close so her voice wouldn't carry. "Agent Miller and Agent Wolfe. They said they're FBI." Reynolds let out a sharp, bitter laugh that turned into a cough. He winced, clutching his bandaged side. "FBI? Right. They showed me badges," Sophia said. "You can buy a badge on the internet," Reynolds gritted out. "Listen to me. They aren't bureau. They're private contractors. Black budget. They work for a company called Chimera Solutions." Chimera. Sophia remembered the word he'd said before passing out. "What do they want?" "Me. Dead," Reynolds said. "And the drive?" "Did you—" "It's safe," Sophia said quickly. "I hid it. They didn't find it." Reynolds closed his eyes for a second, relief washing over his battered face. "Good girl. Smart." He opened his eyes again. "You need to get out of here. Once they realize I'm awake, or once they realize you don't have the drive, they'll scrub the site." "Scrub the site?" Sophia asked, a cold dread pooling in her stomach. "You mean—" "No witnesses," Reynolds said. "That drive contains proof that Chimera has been selling classified, distinct naval intelligence to foreign buyers. If that gets out, half the Pentagon goes to jail. The other half gets executed." Sophia stared at him. This was insane. She was a nurse from Virginia who liked hiking and baking sourdough bread. She wasn't a spy. She wasn't Jason Bourne. "I can call the police," Sophia said. "They own the police," Reynolds said. "Or at least the ones who matter. Miller will have this whole floor locked down in 10 minutes. Comms jamming, no cell signal, no landlines." Sophia instinctively reached for her pocket to check her phone. She pulled it out. No service. "Oh my God," she whispered. "It started," Reynolds said. He tried to sit up, sweat beading on his forehead. "Is there a back way out? A service elevator? A laundry chute?" "There's a freight elevator in the back corridor," Sophia said. "But you can't walk. You have 3 bullet wounds and you're fresh out of surgery." "I'll walk or I'll die," Reynolds said. "And so will you." Suddenly the lights in the ER flickered. Once. Twice. Then the main overheads died, plunging the room into semi-darkness. Only the red emergency lights and the glowing monitors remained. "Power cut," Reynolds whispered. "They're coming in to finish the job." Sophia felt a surge of panic. But then something else took over. Anger. This was her ER. These were her patients. "Dr. Holloway is out there," Sophia said. "And the security guards. 2 fat rent-a-cops and a doctor against a kill team?" Reynolds shook his head. "We need a weapon." Sophia looked around. Scalpels. Scissors. Nothing that could stop a man with a gun. "I don't have a gun," Sophia said. "Improvise," Reynolds growled. Sophia looked at the oxygen tank, then at the defibrillator. "Okay," she said, her voice trembling, but determined. "I have an idea, but I need to get you into a wheelchair." She unlocked the wheels of the bed. "This is going to hurt. I've had worse," Reynolds lied. As she helped him sit up, the double doors of the ER slammed open. Not the main doors, the side doors leading from the ambulance bay. Silenced gunshots. Thwip, thwip. Sophia froze. She heard a body hit the floor. "Move!" Reynolds hissed. Sophia grabbed a wheelchair from the corner, kicking the footrests down. She hooked her arms under Reynolds' armpits. He was heavy, dead weight, but adrenaline gave her strength she didn't know she possessed. She hauled him off the bed. He stifled a scream as his feet hit the floor, his face going grey. "Into the chair," she commanded. He collapsed into it, clutching his abdomen. "Go, back hallway." Sophia grabbed the handles and pushed. She didn't head for the main corridor where Holloway and the guards were. She knew, with sickening certainty, that the thud she had heard was Paul or Dave hitting the linoleum. She steered the wheelchair towards the supply closet at the rear of the trauma bay. It connected to the sterile supply corridor, a narrow passage used to restock bandages and saline. As she pushed through the swinging door, the ER behind them descended into chaos. She heard shouting, Dr. Holloway's voice, cut short by the sound of a taser crackling. "Don't stop," Reynolds grunted. They moved into the dimly lit supply corridor. Rows of shelving towered on either side, filled with boxes of gauze and syringes. It was a maze of shadows. Sophia aimed for the far end, where the freight elevator waited. But as they rounded a corner, a figure stepped out from the shadows. Sophia skidded to a halt, nearly tipping Reynolds out of the chair. It wasn't Miller. It wasn't Wolfe. It was Thomas, the night shift janitor. Thomas was a man of few words. He was in his 60s, with a stooped back and grey hair that looked like steel wool. He spent his nights buffing the floors to a mirror shine, listening to classic rock on an old MP3 player. Thomas held a mop bucket in one hand. In the other, he held a Glock 19. Sophia gasped. "Thomas!" Thomas looked at Sophia, then at the bleeding man in the wheelchair. He didn't look surprised. He looked resigned. "Miss Bennett," Thomas said, his voice gravelly but steady, "I reckon you picked a bad night to work overtime." "Thomas, why do you have a gun?" Sophia stammered. "Took it off the guy by the vending machines," Thomas said casually, jerking a thumb behind him. "Young fella, buzz cut. Didn't see me coming. Hard to hear a janitor when you're too busy talking on your radio." Reynolds looked up at Thomas, eyes narrowing. "You handled him?" "Broken neck," Thomas said. "I used to be recon. Vietnam. 68. He looked at Reynolds's tattoo, visible under the hospital gown. "SEAL?" "Team 4, Reynolds grunted. "Navy," Thomas scoffed gently. "Well, nobody's perfect." He tucked the gun into his waistband and grabbed the handle of the mop bucket. "They got the exits blocked, Miss Bennett. 2 at the front, 1 at the ambulance bay. And that fella in the suit, Miller, he's at the nurses' station hacking the computer system." "They're looking for the drive," Sophia said. "The one in the bathroom ceiling?" Thomas asked. Sophia's jaw dropped. "How did you—" "I cleaned the bathrooms, Miss Bennett," Thomas said with a faint smile. "I see everything. Dust tile was crooked. I fixed it. Put the drive in my pocket." He reached into his grey coveralls and pulled out the black USB drive. "Figured it was important if you were climbing on toilets to hide it." "Give it to me," Reynolds said, reaching out. Thomas shook his head. "No offense, son, but you look like you're about to pass out. Miss Bennett here is the only one with working legs." He handed the drive to Sophia. "Keep it." "We need to get to the roof," Reynolds said. "If we can get to the roof, I can signal. I have a transponder in my boot heel. Short range, but if we're high enough, it might hit the Navy network at the base." "Elevators are locked out," Sophia said. "Miller shut them down." "Stairs," Thomas said. "But Wolfe is prowling the stairwell. I heard him on the radio, the dead guy had." "We have to fight our way up," Reynolds said. He looked at the gun in Thomas's waistband. "Give me the piece." Thomas handed the Glock to the SEAL. Reynolds checked the chamber. 1 in the pipe, 15 in the mag. "I've got a plan," Sophia said suddenly. She looked at the shelves around them. "Thomas, do we have any ammonia in the cleaning closet?" "Gallons," Thomas said. "And we have bleach here in the supply room," Sophia said. Her chemistry training came flooding back. "Chlorine gas." "Tall." Reynolds looked at her, impressed. "Mustard gas. Nasty." "It'll clear the hallway," Sophia said. "Create a distraction." "Let's cook," Thomas said. 5 minutes later, the sterile supply corridor was quiet. Sophia pushed Reynolds toward the heavy fire door that led to the central stairwell. Thomas stood by the door, holding 2 plastic buckets. He had mixed the chemicals in separate containers, ready to combine them. "Ready?" Sophia whispered. "Open it," Reynolds said, raising the gun. Thomas shoved the door open. The stairwell was concrete and cold. Footsteps echoed from above, heavy boots descending rapidly. "Target coming down!" Reynolds shouted. Agent Wolfe appeared on the landing above, a suppressed submachine gun in his hands. He saw them and raised the weapon. Reynolds fired. Bang! Bang! The shots were deafening in the confined space. Reynolds' aim was true, despite his injuries. One bullet sparked off the railing. The other caught Wolfe in the shoulder. The agent grunted and spun back behind the concrete wall. "Now, Thomas!" Sophia screamed. Thomas hurled the contents of one bucket into the other, then kicked the entire mixture down the stairs towards the landing. A thick, white cloud of gas erupted instantly, hissing like a snake. "Masks!" Sophia yelled, pulling her scrub shirt up over her nose and mouth. The gas rose rapidly. From the landing above, they heard Wolfe coughing, violent, retching coughs. The gas was searing his lungs, blinding him. "Go! Go! Go!" Reynolds roared. Sophia pushed the wheelchair into the stairwell, bypassing the gas cloud by staying low, and started hauling the chair up the stairs. "No, that wouldn't work. I have to walk," Reynolds said, gritting his teeth. He pulled himself out of the chair, using the railing for support. Blood bloomed fresh on his bandages. "Lean on me," Thomas said, grabbing the SEAL's good arm. Together, the old Vietnam vet and the wounded SEAL began the agonizing climb up the stairs, leaving the cloud of chemical warfare behind them. Sophia took point, holding the heavy fire extinguisher she had grabbed from the wall. They reached the 3rd floor, then the 4th. The roof access was on the 5th. As they reached the final landing, the door to the roof burst open. It wasn't Wolfe. He was incapacitated in the gas below. It was Miller. He stood in the doorway, framed by the rain and the night sky. He held a pistol leveled at Sophia's chest. He didn't look perfectly tailored anymore. His tie was loose, and he looked annoyed. "End of the line," Miller said. "Nurse Bennett, give me the drive, or the old man dies first." He shifted his aim to Thomas. Sophia froze. She was 5 steps below him. Reynolds was slumped against the wall, gasping for air, the gun in his hand hanging limp. He didn't have the angle to shoot without hitting Sophia. "I have it," Sophia said, reaching into her pocket. She pulled out the drive. "Toss it," Miller commanded. Sophia looked at the drive, then at Miller. "You're going to kill us anyway," Sophia said. "Probably," Miller admitted. "But if you give it to me, I'll make it quick. If you don't, I'll take my time with you." Sophia looked at Reynolds. He made a tiny motion with his head. "Down." Sophia didn't toss the drive. She dropped to her knees. Bang! Miller fired. The bullet whizzed over Sophia's head, where she had been standing a millisecond before. Simultaneously, Reynolds raised his gun and fired from the hip. The bullet hit Miller in the leg. He buckled, screaming, but didn't drop his gun. He raised it again, aiming down at the prone Sophia. Suddenly, a metallic clang rang out. Miller's eyes bulged. He pitched forward, tumbling down the stairs, landing in a heap at Sophia's feet. Standing in the doorway to the roof, holding a massive pipe wrench dripping with rain, was a figure. It was Greg, the front desk nurse. He was soaking wet, shivering, and looked terrified. I came up for a smoke break on the roof," Greg stammered, looking at the unconscious Miller. "I heard shouting." Sophia looked at Greg, then at the pipe wrench, then at the unconscious federal agent. "Nice swing, Greg," she breathed. "I think I killed him," Greg squeaked. "He's breathing," Thomas said, checking Miller's pulse. "Tie him up. Use his tie." Reynolds coughed, spitting blood. "Transponder! Boot!" Sophia scrambled to Reynolds. She reached for his boot. She found the heel, twisted it as he instructed. A small red light began to blink. "Signal is out," Reynolds whispered. "Now, we wait." They sat there on the cold concrete of the stairwell. A rookie nurse, a dying SEAL, a Vietnam vet janitor, and a terrified receptionist, listening to the rain. But the night wasn't over. Miller's radio, clipped to his belt, crackled to life. "Miller, this is command. Cleaning crew is 2 minutes out. ETA to scrub. 2 minutes. Leave no survivors." Sophia looked at Reynolds. "Cleaning crew?" Reynolds's face was grim. That wasn't the backup. That was the exterminators. "We have 2 minutes before a helicopter blows this roof off." Sophia stood up. She looked at her motley crew. "We aren't waiting," Sophia said. "We're fighting." The rain on the roof of St. Jude's Medical Center was no longer just rain. It was a deluge, a curtain of water that turned the world into a grey, shimmering blur. The wind howled around the HVAC units and the concrete housing of the stairwell access door. Sophia burst onto the roof first, staying low. The rooftop helipad, usually reserved for medevac choppers, was empty, a black circle painted with a white H, glistening in the downpour. "Move! Away from the door!" Reynolds shouted from behind her, his voice weak but commanding. Thomas and Greg hauled the seal out into the storm. Reynolds was fading fast. The adrenaline that had carried him up 5 flights of stairs was burning off, leaving behind the cold reality of hypovolemic shock. His skin was the color of old parchment. "Where do we go?" Greg screamed over the wind. He was still clutching the pipe wrench, his knuckles white. "Behind the chillers!" Thomas pointed to a row of massive industrial air conditioning units about 30 yards away. "Solid steel. It'll stop bullets." They scrambled across the slippery gravel roof. Sophia slipped, scraping her knee, but scrambled back up. They threw themselves behind the metal housing of the AC units just as the sound arrived. It wasn't the rhythmic whop 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 of a news chopper or a medevac. It was a low, mechanical growl that vibrated in their teeth. A helicopter rose from the edge of the building like a dark leviathan. It was matte black, no lights, no markings. A ghostly silhouette against the stormy sky. It was an MH-6 Little Bird, modified for urban warfare. On the side, mounted on a rail, a minigun spun up with a high-pitched whine. "Get down!" Reynolds roared, tackling Sophia into the gravel. "Brat!" The sound was like a canvas ripping. A stream of tracers tore through the night, chewing up the concrete lip of the roof and shredding the stairwell door they had just exited. Chunks of cement and metal sprayed everywhere. "They aren't landing!" Sophia screamed, covering her head. "They're strafing us! They want to bury us under the rubble," Reynolds gasped, checking his stolen Glock. "I can't hit a pilot from here with a handgun. Not in this wind." The helicopter banked, circling for another pass. The downdraft kicked up a blinding spray of water. "We need to bring it down," Thomas said, his face grim. He looked at the massive AC unit they were hiding behind. "Miss Bennett, these units, they run on high-voltage circuits, right?" "Yes," Sophia nodded. 480 volts. "And they have those big condenser fans on top," Thomas said, pointing to the spinning blades above them. "So?" Greg asked, shivering. "So," Thomas said, pulling a heavy coil of copper wire from his tool belt, something he apparently carried everywhere. "If we can snag the rotor, or blind the pilot." "I have a better idea," Sophia said, her eyes scanning the roof. "The oxygen main." She pointed to a cluster of pipes running along the parapet wall, painted bright green, the hospital's central oxygen supply. One of the relief valves was right next to the helipad. "If we rupture that valve when the chopper is over it..." Sophia trailed off. "Oxygen doesn't burn, Sophia," Greg argued. "It just accelerates combustion." "Exactly," Sophia said. She looked at Reynolds. "You have a gun. The chopper has hot exhaust. If we flood the air intake with pure oxygen..." "Engine runaway," Reynolds finished her thought, a savage grin appearing on his bloody face. "Or a compressor stall. It'll drop like a stone." "He's coming around!" Thomas shouted. The little bird was leveling out, nose dipping for a kill run. The pilot was lining them up. "Greg, Thomas, draw his fire!" Reynolds ordered. "Keep him focused on the left." "You want me to what?" Greg squeaked. "Just wave your arms and look like a target," Thomas yelled, grabbing Greg by the collar and dragging him towards the far end of the AC unit. Thomas pulled a road flare from his pocket, something he kept for checking dark vents, and lit it. The red magnesium light hissed into life, blindingly bright in the gloom. He threw it onto the open roof, away from their cover. The helicopter pilot took the bait. The nose of the chopper swung towards the flare. "Now!" Reynolds yelled. "Sophia, which pipe?" "The green one with the red wheel. The valve," Sophia pointed. It was 20 feet away, exposed. Reynolds raised the Glock. His hands were shaking. He braced his wrist on the AC unit. He took a breath, held it, and squeezed the trigger. Bang! Miss. Sparks flew off the concrete. "Steady," Reynolds whispered to himself. The minigun spun up again. Whine! Bang! The valve exploded. A jet of pressurized oxygen, invisible but incredibly loud, shrieked out of the pipe, shooting straight up into the air, directly into the flight path of the hovering helicopter. The chopper flew right into the plume. The engine intake sucked in the pure oxygen. The reaction was instantaneous. The turbine engine, designed for a specific fuel-to-air ratio, suddenly burned white-hot. A massive boom echoed as the engine backfired violently. Flames shot out of the exhaust ports 10 feet long. The rotor RPM spiked uncontrollably, then stalled. The sound of the engine turned into a grinding shriek of tearing metal. The helicopter lurched sideways, losing lift. The tail rotor clipped the edge of the parapet wall. Crunch! The machine spun wildly, crashing down onto the helipad. It didn't explode in a movie fireball, but it hit with the force of a car crash, the rotors shattering and sending deadly shrapnel flying in every direction. The fuselage groaned and tipped onto its side, sliding towards the edge of the roof. It teetered there for a second, then stopped, caught on the safety netting. Silence returned to the roof, save for the rain and the hissing of the broken oxygen pipe. Did we get them?" Greg asked, peeking over the top of the AC unit. "Check fire," Reynolds rasped. "Stay down." The side door of the wrecked helicopter kicked open. A man in black tactical gear crawled out. He was dazed, bleeding from a head wound, but he still held a carbine rifle. He looked up and saw them. He raised the rifle. Reynolds tried to lift his gun, but his strength was gone. The gun slipped from his fingers. "Sophia, run!" The man on the wreckage leveled his rifle at Sophia. Then a red dot appeared on the man's chest, then another on his head. Then a dozen red laser dots danced across the wreckage of the helicopter and the man's tactical vest. A voice, amplified by a loudspeaker, boomed from the sky above, cutting through the storm. "United States Navy, drop the weapon! Drop it now!" Sophia looked up. Hovering high above the storm clouds, descending like angels of vengeance, were two massive MH-60 Seahawk helicopters. The floodlights clicked on, bathing the roof in blinding white light. The man on the wreckage hesitated. Thwip! A single shot from a sniper on the lead Seahawk took him in the shoulder. He dropped the rifle and collapsed. Ropes dropped from the Seahawks. Men in full combat gear, real SEALs this time, fast-roped down to the roof with fluid precision. They moved like water, surrounding the wreckage, surrounding Sophia and her team. "Hands! Let me see hands!" "Never!" The lead operator shouted, moving towards them. Sophia raised her hands. Thomas did the same. Greg dropped the wrench. Reynolds didn't move. He was slumped against the metal housing, his eyes closed. "Officer down!" Sophia screamed, pointing at Reynolds. "He's a SEAL! He's Commander Reynolds! He needs help!" The lead operator reached them. He looked at Reynolds's face, then at the tattoo on his shoulder. He tapped his headset. "Command, this is Bravo 1. We have the package. Package is critical. I repeat, package is critical. We need a medic, now." He looked at Sophia. Under the night vision goggles, his eyes were human, concerned. "You the one who kept him alive?" "Yes," Sophia sobbed, the adrenaline finally crashing. "I'm the nurse." "Good work," the operator said. "We'll take it from here." The flight to Naval Station Norfolk was a blur of rotor noise and exhaustion. Sophia, Thomas, and Greg huddled in the back of the Seahawk, wrapped in wool blankets, watching the rain-slicked lights of the city pass below. They weren't arrested, but they were certainly being detained. They were marched into a windowless, soundproof briefing room deep inside a building that didn't appear on GPS. 2 people waited for them, a sharp-eyed woman in a suit introduced as NCIS agent Baxter, and a man in a dress-white uniform who radiated authority, Vice Admiral Harrison. "Commander Reynolds is in surgery at Portsmouth Naval," Harrison stated immediately, anticipating the question burning in Sophia's eyes. "He's critical, but the surgeons say he's too stubborn to die. He'll make it." Sophia let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 3 hours. "We have Agent Miller in custody," Agent Baxter added, her voice clipped and efficient. "However, Chimera Solutions is already spinning a narrative. They claim Reynolds went rogue, stole classified data to sell on the black market, and that they were the patriots trying to recover it." The Admiral leaned forward, his hands clasped on the mahogany table. "Without the drive, Miss Bennett, it is the word of a dead man walking against a multi-billion-dollar defense contractor. We need the evidence." Sophia hesitated. She looked at Thomas. The old janitor, scrubbed of soot but still wearing his coveralls, gave her a barely perceptible nod. Sophia reached into her pocket and pulled out the small, black USB drive with the silver chimera etching. She placed it on the table, but as Baxter reached for it, Sophia slammed her hand down, covering the device. "Wait," Sophia said, her voice trembling but defiant. "Miller had a badge. Wolf had a badge. How do I know you aren't with them? How do I know you won't just destroy this?" The room went deathly silent. A Marine guard by the door shifted, but Admiral Harrison didn't get angry. A slow, respectful smile spread across his face. "You have good instincts, Miss Bennett," Harrison said. "Reynolds chose well." The Admiral reached into his tunic and slid a heavy, jagged object across the table. It was a challenge coin. It bore the exact same trident design as the tattoo on Reynolds' arm. "I was his commanding officer in Coronado," Harrison said softly. "I sent him to get that drive. I am the one he was trying to come home to." Sophia looked at the coin, then at the Admiral's tired, honest eyes. She lifted her hand. Baxter plugged the drive into a ruggedized laptop. Seconds later, a video window popped up. It was undeniable proof. Grainy surveillance footage of Agent Miller and a rogue general selling blueprints for the Navy's hypersonic missile systems to a foreign operative. "Treason," Harrison whispered, his face hardening into cold fury. "Get the Judge Advocate General. I want Chimera dismantled. I want Miller in Leavenworth before the sun comes up." He stood and looked at the ragtag group. A nurse, a janitor, and a receptionist. "You 3 have done a service to your country tonight that you cannot fully understand. The Navy is in your debt." 6 months later. The Virginia sun felt different now, warmer, lighter. Sophia sat at a small cafe table near the boardwalk, nursing an iced coffee. She wasn't wearing scrubs. She wore a sundress and sandals. St. Jude's was part of her past. The media circus following the gang shootout prevented by security cover story had been too overwhelming. Instead, she had a letter of recommendation from a 3-star admiral and a new acceptance letter in her bag, Johns Hopkins Medical School. "Is this seat taken?" Sophia looked up. Standing there, leaning on a cane, was a man in jeans and a grey t-shirt. He had a slight limp, but the grey pallor of death was gone, replaced by a healthy tan. "Jack," Sophia breathed, standing up. "I didn't get a chance to say thank you," Reynolds said, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners. "I was a little busy bleeding out." "I forgive you," she smiled, motioning for him to sit. "How are the others?" "Thomas is officially the head of security for the Naval Museum, a nice, quiet desk job. And Greg—" Reynolds grinned, shaking his head. "Believe it or not, Greg joined the Navy. He's in boot camp, wants to be a corpsman. Said if he could swing a pipe wrench, he could patch a wound." Sophia laughed, a genuine sound that felt good in her chest. Reynolds reached into his pocket and slid a small velvet box across the table. The Admiral wanted to do a ceremony, but he figured you'd hate the attention. He asked me to deliver this. Inside lay the Civilian Service Medal. "You saved my life, Sophia," Reynolds said, his voice dropping to a serious whisper. "But more than that, you saved my honor. If they had taken that drive, I would have died a traitor. You gave me the truth back." "I just did my job," Sophia said. "I'm a nurse. We save people." "You're more than a nurse," Reynolds said, looking out at the ocean. "You stood your ground when the world was falling apart. You're a warrior." They sat there for a long time, watching the waves roll in. The nightmare was over. The bad guys were in prison. The rain had stopped. And for the first time in a long time, Sophia Bennett didn't feel like a rookie. She felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. Sophia Bennett's story is a terrifying reminder that heroism isn't just about strength or training. It's about making the right choice when the world is falling apart around you. She stood between a dying man and a corrupt system, armed with nothing but a wheelchair and her conscience. The one question the FBI asked her was meant to end her life. Instead, it started a new one. If this story had you on the edge of your seat, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a true story of survival. And tell me in the comments, if you were in Sophia's shoes, would you have handed over the drive? Stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.